All right, so welcome to the 9th grade English class. So the key topics that we're going to be working toward are analyzing how point of view and or author purpose shapes the content and styles of diverse texts. And we're going to analyze a variety of related literary texts and evaluate how an author draws on, alludes to, or transforms source material to provide a deeper and more thorough interpretation of the text. So with this particular class, Intro to Poetry, I know some of you have probably seen the word imagery and you're thinking, oh no, Mr. Griffin, we beat that one to death. As we move through, one thing that we're going to be looking at as an objective is to broaden our individual definitions of imagery. Because one thing we're going to begin doing is thinking about our thinking. So imagery as a whole provides us with some communication, it provides us with different ways to describe our environment. But as it is used often in literature, we're going to find that there's some very different motives. So what you're going to need today is a pencil or pen, 2 sheets of blank paper, and a curious mind. Does anyone need any paper? Everybody's good? Okay. So on 1 sheet of paper, write 1 complete sentence about what you already know about imagery. It doesn't have to be complex, just complete. And we want to label it page 1. Then on a separate sheet of paper, write your name in the upper left-hand column and label it page 2. And then briefly jot down a question that you have going in about how imagery works in poetry. Is imagery used simply to make it sound good? Is imagery used to persuade us? Is imagery used to attract us to it? And then pens, pencils down when you're done, so I know you're finished. We want to set those aside. Okay. So as we begin to look at imagery, if we break down just the word imagery, we want to look at image to show, to represent. And then the suffix ERY has to do with things collectively. So we're showing things collectively. And as we begin to engage or participate in literary texts, when is imagery helpful in daily life? Can you think of any instances when you may use imagery in your daily life?
To tell someone a story.
Ah, yeah. And what if I say, Leah, can you grab that pencil for me? What's a question that Leah might have?
Where is it?
Where is it? Right. So through imagery, I can describe, I need the red pencil, I need the red pencil on the desk over there. So those are everyday uses that we take for granted just a little bit, and you can imagine some confusion where we go through life without any use of imagery. So some basic ones that we use fairly commonly are adjectives, metaphors, adverbs, similes, onomatopoeia is the big complex looking word, but it's probably the simplest one up there. Does anyone know what that one is? Has anyone heard that one in the past classes?
Well, bang is up there. but
Exactly.
Words that are actually the sound of what you're making.
Perfect, right. They are the sound themselves. So snap, bang, boing. And metaphors. Metaphors, similes are the ones probably most often confused, and we make them very complex. And we're going to talk about them more as we really get into poetry. But as we look at them now, I just want us to see the ones that we use in everyday life without even thinking. So as I said earlier, we want to begin thinking about our thinking, which sounds like a lot of words that say nothing, but it is us looking at how imagery, what we bring to imagery, what imagery can and can't do, and really why it shows up in poetry. So we're going to start very simply. Please don't make fun of my picture, right? But, so the car is red. As we said earlier, does the sentence convey a mental image? Yeah, it's a red car, right? Instantly. But one question to ask is, Brittany's image of a red car the same as Leah's red car?
No.
Or is Anna's image of a red car, or is my image of a red car? So it does convey something, but would we like to know more? Right. That doesn't really engage me about a car, the red car, right? So if we move forward a little bit further, the shiny car is like a glistening apple, right? Again, don't make fun of my sentence. We're just kind of progressing here. It'll get more exciting. So the shiny car is like a glistening apple. I find out a little bit more information about the car, right? But again, the shiny car, my shiny car,
Yeah.
Brittany's shiny car. But as I read the sentence, I start to get mental images, right? So I know the car is going to be shiny, but then I'm also told it's like a glistening apple, which for me might be an apple laying in Kroger's pile of apples. For others, it may have exposure to apple trees. Maybe it's a glistening apple in the sun. Well, what that does lead me to is an image in my mind that looks something like this. And it happens very quickly, but it is what I bring to it that gets me to this image in my mind. What image comes to your mind when you think of a shiny car as like a glistening apple? Becomes more and more complex when we add metaphor, simile, and other adjectives. So, can we say that imagery is completely individual? Is it always limited?
Depends on the description.
When might it, can you provide an example of what you're thinking?
Like if it was really descriptive of like exactly what kind of car and everything, then I think we would all probably come to the same image. But if it was kind of left open, like a shiny car, when we, like you said, we might all have a different car color or car type.
Does anyone have a differing opinion, or does everyone believe that it's completely individual? Or that it's not always completely individual? Not always. Can it be manipulated for a distinct purpose? Can anyone think of an example when imagery can be used to portray a particular image? And this is still out of our everyday life. If I'm buying a car, would I be looking for a shiny car? Might there be an instance when I need to know it's shiny, or that I feel better about looking at a shiny car? I might not care as much about whether or not it's a glistening apple,
Yeah.
but might I care if it's a sports car or a hybrid car? So I can begin to paint a picture that's going to attract me toward that car. So we talked about, is imagery completely individual? As we stated, sometimes it is, but it's almost always contextual. So the context is going to depend on the other person understanding my exact imagery. Right? And is imagery manipulated for a distinct purpose? I think most often it probably is. When I'm conveying something to a friend, I'm using words that we're going to at least share some common communication with. But when we look at advertisers, in particular, we're in a little bit of a different zone because we also usually get images. So we have someone directing the imagery even more. But do you notice anything particular missing? You can't read this one. This is actually a dentist. And I left it kind of small because When I first looked at that particular image, there's nothing about it that said dentist.
Except her smile.
Right, except her smile, but she's in a swing, she's out in the woods, she's in a tree, nothing in particular, but yet I was drawn to it because I was looking for images. But what about Coke or twice the guts, double the glory? So one is for Nike, one is for Coke. Coke says, open a Coke, open happiness.
You told that was Coke.
You're saying, what are they doing? Oh, you're drinking the bottle, but it's sunny outside, there's trees. So they're saying happiness is being outside on a sunny day.
Right.
Drinking
So-
Coke.
They're definitely manipulating the overall imagery a little bit, but in the case of advertising, especially these two, this one doesn't even say anything about wearing sports clothes,
Yeah.
but it's a Nike ad. We at least see a Coke in this ad, but it doesn't tell us anything about the taste. It doesn't tell us anything about anything that's supposed to happen as a result of it, other than we're going to open a can of happiness. So as we move into poetry, we're looking at authors. We're looking at authors who were very specific about their imagery. They had a reason most of the time for choosing what they chose. One thing we want to kind of begin to look at, though, if we look at Langston Hughes, the rain makes steel pools on the sidewalk. The rain makes running pools in the gutter. The rain plays a little sleep song on our roof at night. Certainly, as a poet, and this is only one stanza, there is something that Langston Hughes wants me to take from that. There is some definite imagery. But do we think, at least in this instance, that he's really guiding us to a particular? Certainly not guiding us like Coke was, right? Or he's not guiding us like Nike was, right? The contextual aspect is that all of these words by themselves, I probably know. They're not terribly complex, right? These are my people, I find them on the street and shadow through any wild, all wild, my people, a dance of strangers in my blood. Again, words that they're in my context for the most part. Maybe not in the shape that they have them up there. Once I lay on the bank with my eyes closed, listening to the sound of the water main. Millie befriended a stranded star whose rays 5 languid fingers were. And who has not sat afraid before his own heart's curtain? So as we look at poetry, we also look at writers who have become skilled at assembling the words in a way that's going to best describe or best show us what it is they're trying to show us. So with this particular piece here, this is a song that we're going to look at the video as well as hear the song. But I chose a song from my own experience, but I hoped it would be one that no one has heard before. I don't think anyone's heard Leonard Cohen, right?
No.
Okay. So would someone like to read that for me? Just a volunteer.
It was deep into his fiery heart. He took the dust of Joan of Arc. And then she clearly understood if she was fire, oh, then she must be wood. I saw her wince, I saw her cry, I saw the glory in her eye. Myself I long for love and light, but must it come so cruel and oh, so bright?
Thank you very much, Leah. Is anyone familiar with the story of Joan of Arc? At all as a historical figure, at least?
Like Joan of the Arc, like the novel.
Yeah, but she's also a historical figure as well. Do you remember what the gist of Joan of Arc's life was?
To save things.
Well, she was a warrior. She was a female knight, as it were, but knighted herself. She was eventually put to death, right? But she had a fairly long military career. But what Leonard Cohen chose to isolate and to show us is this particular scene that he felt was important. So as we listen to the song and watch the video,
it was deep into his fiery heart. He took the dust of Joan of Arc, and then she clearly understood if he was fire, oh, then she must be wood. I saw her wince, I saw her cry, I saw the glory in her eye. Myself, I long for love and light, but must it come so cruel and oh so bright?
so while I may not ultimately make you a fan of Leonard Cohen, what I do want, or what I am curious about is, can we get a sense of what specifically that Cohen is trying to tell us? A little bit. More so, can we, after watching the video, can we get an idea of what he's trying to show us? And do we think the video changed what we thought before at all? Did it deepen it? Did it enhance it? Did it create any new images that we didn't have prior to?
I mean, I saw somebody sad before, and I saw that in the video. I mean, I guess it gave me more of a description, like, it gave me what maybe Joan of Arc looked like, but what I saw before was sad, and what I saw in the video was also sad, so
Okay.
I don't know if it really changed it that much. I don't know why she was like up on a wooden,
She was actually burned at the stake.
okay, so that was deepened with the video, because I didn't know it was out of her.
Okay. So as Leah was saying, it didn't really change the tone or the mood, because I think the sadness and the particular moment that he chose and the darkness of it kind of came through in the lyrics themselves. And like Leah, do you feel like the imagery aligned with your own in terms of the video?
It makes more sense with the, if he was fire, then she must be wood. She's trying to say. So she was wood.
Oh, so it's kind of like a love song in a way, but the man's no good for her, and he caused her demise.
Right. So Leonard Cohen, a little bit of background on Leonard Cohen is that he was not very concerned with the historical aspect of Joan of Arc. He was more concerned with that moment where, much like, other biblical figures, she was being left to sacrifice herself at a moment when she realized that this is just the way it is. It was a moment of acceptance. So at this point, take out a blank sheet of paper. If you need one, I have one.
Not the one page and page two.
This is a page we're not going to use at the end of class, but we do need something individually to write on for some group work. So I want you to think of your favorite song, and we want to isolate it to 4 lyrics with no sex, no violence.
Can I look up the lyrics?
You can take a moment to look up the lyrics. We'll take a couple minutes to but again, only 4.
In high
4
school,
lines.
in high school, it could be more complicated.
It could be what?
In high school, it might be okay to have a little bit more violence and cuss words because they're older.
Yeah, for what we're gonna do, I would rather it be a little bit,
You say it has to be a love song?
no, it doesn't have to be, just your favorite song. And then just pins down when you're finished, so I know you're done. Take a couple minutes.
We're just writing down the lyrics.
Just the 4 lines.
I know.
So out of all the lyrics of your favorite song, you do have to pick 4 lines. Did anyone have trouble deciding their favorite? Everyone seems to start writing right away.
I just downloaded the song I'm listening to.
Okay. So we're going to move into one piece of poetry. Again, thinking about imagery and thinking about our thinking in the way that we approach poetry as well as what we bring to it. The poem we're going to look at a piece of is by Rilke. Rilke is a Bohemian Austrian poet. He's considered one of the most significant poets in the German language, loosely slanted, focusing on concepts of disbelief, solitude, and uncertainty. What he did do, however, is he is credited with creating the object poem, attempting to describe with utmost clarity physical objects, the silence of their concentrated reality. So he didn't focus as much on landscapes as much as he was trying to portray a still moment, a static moment, not always a particular object. Most of his poetry was written in German. He himself was fluent in other languages, not English. So everything that we know of him is a translation, not by him, right? But one thing, without even knowing the language, we can look at, and we can see a very typical poem structure. We can see the second line short, right, consistently throughout. So we do get the sense that there's going to be some rhyme scheme, or there's going to be some normal, this is not free verse, right? So this translation is by Edward Snow, and the poem itself is called The Walk. So would someone volunteer to read this piece again?
Already my gaze is on the hill that sunlit won. Up ahead on the path I scarcely started, in the same way, what we couldn't grasp us, blazing visible there in the distance. It changes us even if we do not reach it, into what we scarcely sensing it already are, a gesture signals answering our gesture, but we feel only the opposing one.
So relatively straightforward. If we just look at the first stanza, do we have a sense of what Rilke is comparing his moment to? Is there imagery there that we can access, that we have context for? Sunlit hill. Have we ever been looking up ahead on a path, looking forward? Blazingly visible, might be, right? And in the second stanza, even if we do not reach it into what we scarcely sensing it already are, becomes a little more complex. Right? But if we break it down by sentence, and changes us even if we do not reach it. Right? We can break it down a little bit, and does that give us a little more access if we just look at the first sentence? So even if I do not reach it, have we ever tried to do something and not succeeded? Into what we scarcely sensing it already are. Right? A gesture signals answering our gesture. Does that create any certain image for anybody?
It's like someone waving and then
Yeah, that's kind of what I think of. And but we feel only the opposing wind. So I'm walking along and I can feel that breeze coming at me. What I do want to touch upon as we move into Rilke is imagery that we also possess with single words. So for myself, when I think of poetry and I think of all of the accessible poetry out there, I have to also agree that a lot of it comes to me through someone else, right? And when I think of the word tolerance, I think of tolerating. So it means I am not changing my position in any way whatsoever. I'm just going to tolerate this other position. So I'm going to ask that as a class, we're going to drop the word tolerance as we move into poetry from other cultures. And I want us to think more about cultural inclusivity. Because I do believe that imagery is uniquely universal and equally valued. So as we saw with just one poem of Rilke, there are things there I can access, even though he's never set foot on American soil, and even though I personally at least have never set foot on German soil. You know, there's a hill out there, you know, that he saw. There's a hill here, you know, that I've seen. So I don't want to just tolerate Rilke's imagery. I want to see its value and I want to see it inclusively. So again, I just went out and found an image because I do believe more now than ever before, we are bombarded by images daily. Whether it's images of ads, whether it's images of goods, places to go, services. You know, we're a very image-driven company. I'm always within reach of a YouTube video on my phone. But Rilke's writing in a time when that was not the case. And I myself, unfortunately, sometimes can remember a time before music videos, when all you had were music lyrics. There was no VH1, there was rarely a video accompanying a tune, unless it was just a video of whoever it was playing live somewhere. So the culture of kind of guiding and directing our imagery was done more so simply with words, and sometimes with few words and sometimes with many words. If we really just deconstruct the little bit of the first stanza and look at what he's really just trying to tell us, can we simplify it without the imagery? And I did the first one here, and I'm staring at a hill, right? Which goes back to my first image. Doesn't give me a lot. But sometimes it's helpful to deconstruct it into its simplest form so that I can get a sense of what they're trying to show me. And then sometimes through what's not present, I get a sense of what they're trying to show me that's unique. Meaning, I've stared at a hill. Thanks for sharing, right? I've stared at a lot of hills. What's going to make this hill, right? What's my buy-in? What's going to make this hill important to me? Does anyone want to take a different line and oversimplify it into its basic, most basic form?
I don't know if this is right or not, but that part that says in the same way, but we could not grasp does. It's almost like he's standing there looking at it and he wants to grab or get to the mountain, but instead he's just gonna stare at it or just admire the beauty of it, but it's grasping him, like the look of it. It's appealing, so he can't actually get there, but it's good enough just to see it.
Right. I want it, yet it has me for some reason. This is a completely separate translation, and I'll read this one. My eyes already touch the sunny hill, going far ahead of the road I have begun. So we are grasped by what we cannot grasp. It has inner light even from a distance, and charges us, even if we do not reach it, into something else, which hardly sensing it, we already are. A gesture waves us on, answering our own wave, but what we feel is the wind in our faces. The exact same poem as it was in German, translated, in this case, by Robert Bly. Do we get a different sense from this version? So it is important with poetry, but also with a lot of information that we receive, whether it has an accompanying image with it or not, is what are they trying to show me, right? Who or where or why is this information coming to me, right? And how much stake can I really put in it? So, at least in this sense, and with most poetry, I can decide, right? I can decide which one speaks to me most. This one may have more context for you. My eyes already touch the sunny hill. You know, I look up, I can already see the hill. It's far less complicated when we get down to, so we are grasped by what we cannot see. That feels a lot clearer. But I'm not entirely sure it says the same thing. Already my gaze is on the hill, that sunlit one, or my eyes already touch the sunny hill. So we are grasped by what we cannot see, in the same way what we couldn't grasp grasped us. So they're saying some very different things, right? But we also have to trust, at least with both of these individuals, that they are well-respected translators and that they did in fact know German and they weren't just making up whatever they chose to make up. But with most translation, what we are getting is someone else's imagery, right? And as we said, imagery can be very individual. Right? So in this case, I'm getting a little bit of Edward Snow's imagery, and hopefully some of Rilke's. And in the other case, I'm getting Robert Bly's, and again, hopefully some of Rilke's poetry. So enough of me talking, and we're going to do some creating. So with the lyrics that you guys wrote down, normally we would break up into at least two groups, but we'll do it really all as one. And since each person has 4 lyrics, we want to come up with a group of, we'll do 6. So each person has to use at least 2 of their lyrics. And as you combine them, keep them as they are, but try to construct something that has some relationship. So we're going to end up with one song with lyrics from 3 different songs. Does everyone follow me? So you're going to have to read through your lyrics as a group, and then you're going to construct it. So we'll take about 5 minutes. How much time?
It's almost 11.
I don't know what time I started.
We're definitely more than 15.
I have more than 15?
Yeah, for sure. You're at 34 minutes.
Oh, so I'm done.
Well,
Well, then just, okay, so
we
we
can
won't,
pretend, we can do it and then it can stop at 35 so she sees that.
that's all right, I'll short it up. So just to debrief quickly, as we said, imagery is used in everyday conversation and the communication of ideas. Imagery is contextual and often personal and therefore malleable. My idea of it, your idea of it is going to vary. Imagery can be constructed to persuade, demonstrate, and describe, and imagery crosses cultural and linguistic boundaries. So As your assessment, take out your sheet, label page 1, list 2 things you learned about imagery today. Incomplete sentences, take your sheet, label page 2, briefly answer your own questions about imagery. Create a paragraph, 4 sentences, but no more than 4, describing today's class using imagery. Complete sentences, though I do want to see simile, metaphor, adjective, adverb in there somewhere. And then write a working definition for the following literary poetic term that we didn't discuss today, but we will discuss. And as it applies to what we did discuss today, just on face value of the words alone, give me some definition of what you think the term, the willing suspension of disbelief, means. And you can leave them up here on your way out.